You've been lied to. Every TED Talk, self-help guru, and viral Instagram quote has sold you the fantasy that with the right words, the right tone, and a pinch of charm, you can influence anyone. But here's the raw truth: most people are unmovable. They live behind walls of illusion, ideology, and ego, impervious to logic, inspiration, or even brutal honesty. And no one understood this more than Friedrich Nietzsche. Nietzsche didn't just question why we fail to influence people, he asked whether we should even try. In this video, we're pulling apart the bones of influence itself. You'll meet forgotten philosophers, unfiltered truths, and a brutal historical example of what happens when influence fails catastrophically. Subscribe now, because this isn't motivation. This is revelation. Modern culture has canonized the influencer. Not just social media stars, but anyone who masters the art of persuasion, charisma, or brand building is treated like a minor deity. We read books on how to win friends and obsess over follower counts as if they were measures of divine favor. Influence, in this narrative, is salvation. The more of it you have, the more power, meaning, and impact you supposedly possess. But Nietzsche saw through this facade like it was glass. To him, this obsession was a sign of weakness, a neurosis disguised as ambition. Influence, he believed, wasn't authentic power, it was often soft coercion wrapped in charm and diplomacy. You're not leading minds, you're manipulating insecurities. Real power doesn't beg to be liked or followed. It doesn't perform. It acts. The influencer is not a leader but a salesman, a mirror to the crowd's desires, not a breaker of its illusions. At the heart of Nietzsche's philosophy is a brutal recognition: most people don't want truth, they want comfort. They cling to inherited beliefs, moral platitudes, and familiar rituals, not because they are true or noble, but because they are safe. He called it the herd instinct, and it governs everything from religion to politics to relationships. The herd doesn't want to be influenced, they want to be reassured. They crave the illusion of meaning, not its confrontation. To truly influence such people, Nietzsche argued, you'd have to break their foundations. Not with clever rhetoric, but with existential rupture. His infamous line from Thus Spoke Zarathustra, "You go to women. Do not forget the whip," is often misread as misogyny. In context, it's not about women at all, it's about the fundamentally violent nature of influence. Persuasion isn't a conversation, it's a confrontation. Influence, if it's real, doesn't nudge, it shatters. It doesn't stroke egos, it destroys illusions. Before Nietzsche, there was Arthur Schopenhauer, a man Nietzsche admired and later rejected, but never fully escaped. Schopenhauer introduced a dark and relentless idea: human beings are not guided by reason but by will, a blind, irrational drive that surges beneath every thought and action. You might think people are open to influence if you just speak their language or present good arguments. Schopenhauer would laugh. People don't want logic, they want what satisfies their will. Try to convince someone to change, and you're not debating ideas, you're wrestling with the beast beneath their skin. To influence someone in any meaningful way, you'd have to reprogram that beast. You'd have to redirect the will itself. But the will doesn't listen. It wants. It devours. It fears. Reason is just its mask. So when you try to influence someone, you're not meeting them on the field of intellect, you're charging headfirst into a storm of craving, dread, and compulsion. Then came Max Stirner, the forgotten anarchist who treated even Nietzsche's defiance as another form of bondage. Stirner believed that all ideologies, whether religious, moral, or political, are illusions we invent to enslave ourselves. He called them spooks. His ultimate claim: there is no such thing as moral obligation or objective truth, only the individual ego and its self-interest. Every attempt to influence another person, then, is just one ego asserting dominance over another. It's not noble. It's not enlightening. It's war. And the target isn't stupid, they feel it. That's why they push back. That's why they smile politely while ignoring you. Deep down, they sense the trespass. Influence, in this light, becomes an act of aggression. You're not inspiring them, you're threatening their autonomy. Stirner's radical insight: people aren't resisting your ideas, they're resisting your invasion. And if they're smart, they should. Michel Foucault took this critique to a whole new dimension. He didn't just question the morality of influence, he questioned its entire premise. For Foucault, there's no such thing as neutral influence. Every relationship is charged with power. Even education, therapy, or conversation is never just about truth sharing, it's about who gets to define the truth, whose framework becomes dominant, whose language becomes law. Power, in Foucault's world, isn't always oppressive or violent, it's embedded in norms, institutions, and daily rituals. When you try to influence someone, you're stepping into a power network that predates both of you. Their resistance isn't just personal, it's structural. You're not just arguing against their beliefs, you're threatening the power systems that gave those beliefs their authority. So influence becomes not a clean act of communication, but a murky game of dominance, submission, and subversion. You don't win with logic, you win with leverage. Nietzsche once said, "You must have chaos within you to give birth to a dancing star." That chaos isn't just creativity, it's rupture. And rupture is what real influence demands. The lie of modern persuasion is that you can calmly, logically, transmit your ideas into someone else's brain like data through a cable. That's not how it works. Influence isn't transmission, it's collision. You don't slip past defenses, you slam into them. You don't persuade the surface, you rupture the core. Real change only happens when someone's internal world cracks, when a long-held belief collapses, when a sacred assumption is shattered. But most people are armored. Their identities are stitched together by trauma, doctrine, fear, politics, and pride. So when you crash into them, don't expect a thank you. Expect a fight. The few who break open, they transform. The rest, they reinforce the shell. If influence really worked the way people claim, Socrates would have been king of Athens. He was brilliant, relentless, and radically committed to the truth. He challenged assumptions, dismantled contradictions, and forced people to think. But when push came to shove, what did the Athenian public do? They killed him. They voted, calmly and legally, to execute their greatest philosopher. Why? Because he threatened their illusions. He disturbed the peace. Socrates didn't fail because he lacked influence, he failed because he had it. The kind that cuts. The kind that hurts. And people don't want that. They want comfort, certainty, belonging. Influence that demands change will always be punished. Socrates didn't drink the hemlock because he lost the argument, he drank it because he won. And winning, in the realm of truth, means losing in the court of public comfort. The Stoics were not salesmen. They didn't believe in winning people over, converting the crowd, or mass enlightenment. Epictetus, perhaps the most clear-eyed of them all, said bluntly, "Don't try to instruct the ignorant unless they ask to learn." That wasn't arrogance, it was clarity. People grow only when they're ready. Otherwise, you're just casting pearls before swine. For the Stoic, the wise man doesn't spread truth like a preacher, he lives it like a warrior. His influence, if it exists, is a byproduct of his integrity, not a strategy for control. He doesn't chase followers, he shapes himself. And in doing so, he becomes a mirror. If others change because of him, good. If not, no matter. He stands alone, unmoved. Influence, in this sense, is not a tactic. It's a consequence of strength. For Nietzsche, the ultimate mistake wasn't trying to influence people, it was needing to. True power, he believed, lies not in persuasion but in creation. The Übermensch, his ideal figure, doesn't argue with the herd, he transcends it. He doesn't try to change the world by committee, he builds a new one from the ground up. His measure is not acceptance but authenticity. The will to power is the engine of this force, not a desire to dominate others, but a drive to manifest one's deepest values regardless of resistance. Influence, in this view, is weak. It depends on the other. Power, by contrast, is sovereign. The Übermensch doesn't market his truth, he embodies it. And that embodiment is its own revolution. Those who see it may follow. Most won't. It doesn't matter. Here's the hard truth: if you live authentically, the herd will turn on you. Not because you're wrong, but because you make them feel exposed. Look at history's great outliers: Jesus, Socrates, Galileo. These weren't influencers in the modern sense. They weren't looking for applause or engagement. They were existential threats. Their presence alone made people uncomfortable, made systems tremble. That's the price of truth. The crowd doesn't cheer for those who wake them up, it crucifies them, poisons them, silences them. If you're trying to be liked, you're not a threat. You're entertainment. But if you live with integrity so fierce it can't be ignored, you'll be hated for it. Not because you're bad, but because you make comfort impossible. And that, for most, is unforgivable. So why do you still care about influencing others? Why do you want them to believe what you believe, see what you see, feel what you feel? Is it compassion? Altruism? Maybe. But maybe not. Influence is often a performance of virtue hiding a demand for control. We tell ourselves we want to help others, but help often comes with strings: agreement, validation, compliance. Scratch beneath the surface of most influence and you'll find insecurity, the subtle terror that if the world doesn't reflect our values, then those values might be false. Nietzsche would ask, can you stand alone in your beliefs without needing anyone to echo them? Can you walk your path without applause, likes, or converts? If not, maybe what you're chasing isn't truth, it's comfort. And if your beliefs only survive when echoed, maybe they were never yours to begin with. Heraclitus, the cryptic oracle of change, believed the only constant is flux. You cannot step into the same river twice, he said, because both you and the river are always changing. That insight cuts deep into the myth of influence. Trying to influence someone, in Heraclitus terms, is like trying to nail down a cloud. People aren't fixed targets, they're moving processes. By the time you've crafted your perfect message, they've already shifted. And even if they seem to agree with you, it's not because you influenced them, it's because their inner current already turned in that direction. Influence, then, is often an illusion of timing. You didn't cause the change, you just caught the wave. Heraclitus reminds us, reality doesn't stand still long enough for anyone to shape it like clay. It flows. And you either flow with it or drown trying to control it. There's a darker twist: much of what we try to influence in others is just our own shadow in disguise. You think you're guiding them. You're confessing. Projection is the psychological sleight of hand where we see in others what we deny in ourselves: our hopes, fears, failures, and ideals. Nietzsche knew this. He believed that most systems of morality, religion, and ideology weren't reflections of truth, but projections of weakness masquerading as virtue. The preacher condemns sin not to save the sinner, but to silence his own urges. The reformer who insists on changing the world is often avoiding the unbearable work of changing himself. So when we try to influence others, what are we really doing? Often, we're shouting at ourselves in someone else's face. Influence, in this light, becomes not persuasion, but displacement, a desperate attempt to fix out there what's fractured in here. At the core of resistance to influence is a primal force: fear. Not fear of the influencer, but fear of what influence implies, that who we are might be false. Nietzsche saw identity not as a given, but as a defense mechanism, a lie constructed to keep chaos at bay. We cling to roles, names, titles, beliefs, not because they're true, but because they anchor us. To let someone influence you in any serious way means you're willing to question that foundation. It means you're ready to kill the false self and step into uncertainty. But most people aren't. Most people will fight, argue, retreat, deflect, anything but change. Because change feels like death. So influence fails, not because it's poorly executed, but because it asks for a sacrifice most are not ready to make, the sacrifice of who they think they are. And yet, there is one kind of influence that breaks through: embodied will. Not slogans. Not arguments. Not charisma. But presence, real, lived authenticity. Nietzsche didn't believe in evangelism. He believed in becoming. The person who fully lives their truth, with no compromise, no pandering, no performance, carries a force that's impossible to ignore. They don't need to convince anyone. They are the argument. Their existence becomes a provocation, a mirror that exposes everyone else's compromise. That's why their influence works. Not because they chase followers, but because their example radiates something unspoken, undeniable. You can dismiss their ideas, but you can't dismiss them. They're real. And in a world of masks and echo chambers, reality hits like lightning. Nietzsche lived this to the bitter end. He had no disciples, no movement, no public success. His books barely sold. He was mocked, dismissed, pitted. Eventually, he collapsed into madness and died forgotten. But that's not the end of the story. Decades later, his words lit fires in philosophy, psychology, art, and politics. Not because he marketed them. Not because he crafted a message. But because he became a force. He didn't try to influence the world, he created his own world. And when the world finally caught up, it found his fingerprints everywhere. That's the paradox: true influence comes only when you stop chasing it. Nietzsche's legacy wasn't shaped by popularity, it was shaped by inevitability. He became what he believed. And in time, that truth proved louder than 1,000 influencers ever could. So here's the brutal truth: you cannot influence most people. They must break before they listen. They must want truth more than comfort. Until then, your words are noise. Your logic is threat. Your influence is fantasy, but if you still choose to speak, speak like Nietzsche. Without hope. Without begging. Without bending. Just fire. If this shook something in you, subscribe. This isn't about building a following. It's about building the few who are ready to become. This is the Beyond the Surface channel. Like the video, share with a friend and subscribe for more videos like this one. Thank you for watching.